All right. Night Brothers Intermittent Fasting Show coming to you once again right here on Facebook Live. We are also on YouTube under our name, Night Brothers Intermittent Fasting Show. Just about now would be the time for you to go out there and right on your page, invite some folks because we got a hot show tonight.
Yes.
A really, really hot show. And let's see who's checking in first. We got Charlene Curtis Adams checking in tonight first.
Hello, Charlene. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Charlene. Glad to have you on board. How's everybody doing tonight?
Excellent.
Well, as my little brother stated, we're really excited about tonight's show. We have a special version of tonight's show here, and with some very, very intriguing guests. We're going to share some wonderful information with you. We're looking forward to your feedback and dialogue as we move forward as well. And without further ado, let's get ready to rumble.
All right, Q. Let me get our new member of the team.
Join the valiant Night Brothers, Sir Aden, Sir Leonard, and Sir Equivian, as they embark on a noble quest to spread the word about the benefits of intermittent fasting. As modern-day warriors on a mission to promote health, wellness, and longevity, they will share their wisdom, tips to help viewers conquer their own personal health.
Thank you, Ngozi. That's Ngozi. She's our newest member.
Word up. Ngozi.
Danny Nutter in the house.
What? Reed Walker. No, you probably.
Sophia Mimi Lee, what's up?
Definitely appreciate your Indeed. Yeah, pump that up.
Welcome to the Night Brothers Intermittent Fasting Show. We are live every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern on our Facebook and YouTube channels. Our show covers subjects related to fasting, dieting, nutrition, exercising, health, fun, and even social topics. So plug us into your weekly schedule, invite a friend, and enjoy the show.
All right, brothers, how y'all doing tonight?
Doing good, big bro. Oh, man, glad to be here.
Good, big brothers.
All right.
Excited about what's going on tonight.
Oh yeah, it's a hot show, Q. We've been waiting for this one for quite a few weeks now.
Yes.
And by now, everybody know that Carl Snowden is going to be on the show tonight. It's no secret. As it is, that was the worst kept secret in Annapolis the last couple of days. But we're excited about having Carl. He's a walking textbook, historian, a man of many talents, with a great amount of knowledge that can help a lot of your families. And Q, I know you're just excited as I am about it.
Yes, I am. And whenever we get an opportunity to just share things with this brother, he imparts so much knowledge to each and every one, and goes the extra mile for people so much. So we're excited to have you, Carl, and excited to have our other special panelists, Miss Melissa Clink, with us as well, all the way from Forsyth, Georgia. So welcome to both of you, and we'll welcome you in a few minutes.
Absolutely. And if those of you, this is your first time watching the Night Brothers show, as you see these comments up on the screen, you can just type a comment. We'll make sure that you're interactive and part of the show as we go throughout the show. If you have a question, anything like that, feel free to ask, and we'll make sure that we present it in the dialogue. What's up, Kenny? What's up, brother?
What's up, big bro? What's going on? What's good? Everything good? Super dope producer.
No doubt. So we're going to keep it moving because we got a lot to cover tonight, and time will go like crazy.
Yes, it is. Michael Lee Moore, what's up, sis?
All right. So right about now, Audience, look, help us out by doing us a quick favor and just type either a 1 in the chat group or just say, welcome Carl, welcome Melissa to the show. Welcome guys to the show.
Yes.
Welcome, guys.
2 heavy hitters.
So Melissa, how you doing down there in Georgia? This is your second time back around.
I'm doing wonderful. It's a little chilly right now in Georgia, so it doesn't feel very much like Georgia. But I'm doing great. I just turned my heat up.
Well, that's something you do. That's something you do very well. You turn the heat up on not only the weather, but the political scene down there. Because you're a mover and shaker. We know how you do.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Brother Carl, how you doing this evening, brother?
I'm with the team. Fantastic. Great.
Awesome, man. So glad to have you on board with us tonight.
Yes, sir. Honor.
And the audience is doing what they do. Welcoming both of you guys to the show. Angela Dwyer, thank you for joining us tonight.
How you doing, Angela?
Peace and love.
Thank you, Sophia.
Yes, indeed. So look, we got a lot to dive into. We're going to start off by, if you're not keenly aware of some of the great things that both Carl and Melissa has done respectively in their states and throughout the regions of the country that their works are most prominently displayed. We're going to give you a quick background on these two, and then we're going to go from there. Miss Juanita Cage, thank you very, very much for jumping on tonight.
Peace and love. It's always a pleasure
Hello,
to have you.
how are you, dear?
Thank you, Juanita.
All right, so let's introduce you to the bios, and then we'll come back on the other side.
Melissa Clink has served as the Forsyth County Democratic Committee Chair for 6 years, where she has a wonderful team of volunteers on her executive board and county committee, as well as grassroots activist coalitions who are all working to change the game in North Georgia in terms of political power. Under her leadership, the 7th Congressional District seat flipped to Democratic representation in Congress, showing that her work has already had national impacts. Melissa has worked with several high-level politicians within the state of Georgia, assisting in the campaigns of both Raphael Warnock and Stacey Abrams. Melissa Clink is deeply committed to improving the lives of all people by promoting citizenship, trustworthiness, respect, and dignity. Most recently, Chair Clink, graduate from the campaign school at Yale, a program the New York Times quoted was sadistically intensive, and is working to build once again in the newly redistricted Very Red Georgia's 6th Congressional District, where she was re-elected to chair January 7th of this year.
Carl Snowden is a pioneering civil rights activist and founder of Carl Snowden and Associates, a private consulting firm established in 1985. The firm specializes in addressing bias and institutional racism, offering transformative solutions to combat these pressing issues. Carl has earned a Master of Human Services from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, equipping him with the knowledge and skills to make a real impact. Throughout his career, Carl has been showcased on numerous local and national television and radio programs, also been featured in prominent publications such as The Washington Post, The Wall Street Journal, and The Baltimore Sun, showcasing his expertise and dedication to the cause. As an advocate for justice and equality, Carl has worked closely with the American Civil Liberties Union (ICLU) in Maryland, winning cases related to voting rights, employment discrimination, and sexual harassment. Currently, Carl serves as the convener for the Caucus of African American Leaders of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, where he continues to champion the rights of marginalized communities. In addition to his remarkable professional accomplishments, Carl has shared his knowledge as a former adjunct faculty member at Sojourner Douglas College, inspiring and educating the next generation of leaders.
All right.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Carl, I got one quick question for you. Some of those black and whites that we saw there, could you take us a little bit back? And we're going to dive deep in the interview. But, man, I was intrigued because I remember as a kid seeing you out there, man, making stuff happen, man. How young were you when you got started? When you had the big afro and everything?
No, actually, I was 15 years old. Some of you know me really well.
Bring the music back a little bit.
I was actually expelled from Annapolis High School at the tender age of 15. In my first demonstration. And what most people don't realize is that from the age of 15 till I was 22 years old, the FBI opened up a file on me. It was a program called intelligence program, COINTELPRO. So at a very early age, I learned the power the government could do. We were able to successfully sue the FBI.
Wow.
State of Maryland, we won a cash settlement. And I got copies of my actual FBI files. And what I did at the time was to make sure that people understood how serious the repression was this is in the early 1970s. This is during the time when Nixon is president of the United States. J. Edgar Hoover was still alive. And so once we won the case against the FBI, I actually made my FBI files public because I wanted people to see what the FBI was. And so you might can imagine what it was like for my mother, who at the time was alive. My mother lived to be 104 years old.
Wow. What a blessing.
My mother told me about the time that the FBI came to visit her and asked her to be a informant, a confidential informant.
What?
So the FBI file is available even today publicly. I made it public because I want people to see it. So those who are interested in looking at the actual FBI file, all they have to do is go to the American Civil Liberties Union in Maryland, and they put the entire file on public display so that people can see. Look at what the government was doing to kids at 15 and 16, who at that time was just simply trying to advocate for what was called a Black Studies program.
So at 15 years old, the FBI, look, I'm trying to set the scene. At 15 years old, the FBI knocks on your door, your mom asks, and your mom's saying, Carl, what the heck did you do?
I never knew that.
Yeah, well, it was one of those moments. There's no question about it. My mother and father was stunned. I mean, it's not every day that the FBI comes in and asks questions, but their young son. I had been expelled from, as I mentioned, Annapolis High School. I was enrolled into a private school here in Annapolis called the Key School.
Yes.
And not only was my parents interviewed, but the teachers who taught me were interviewed at the time. There are several people, some who are still living, who had FBI files open on them simply because they was associated with me. Evola Pierce, who's still alive, Evola Peters had a file open on her. Another woman named Josephine Brown, we call her Niecy. She had an FBI file open on her. Michael Tyrone Brown. So a lot of people who I grew up with at the time and was involved with found themselves with FBI files. There was a youth group that we put together called Truth and Soul. Truth and Soul. And that particular group came under the scrutiny of the FBI as well. So we're living in a very interesting period. And in many ways, history is repeating itself. The kind of repression we saw in the late 60s and early 70s, we're seeing it again from 40 years later. And it's dangerous.
Absolutely. And Carl, we have another freedom fighter on the show with us tonight. Melissa Clink out of Forsyth County, Georgia. And Melissa's, didn't you talk about a freedom fighter? She's in the deepest of deepest red counties in Georgia. And she's down there flipping votes like people flip pancakes. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So look, we have a full show. We're going to dive into it tonight. Melissa's no stranger to the Night Brothers show. This is her second appearance and won't be the last. So we're going to continue on to the next segment.
the Night Brothers Intermittent Fasting Show. Healthy is the new sexy. So let's get ready to roll. We have a very interesting show for you, and we're ready to go. So if you have your comments, once again, place your comments on the side so we can bring them up. It's always important to have your input in this show because it's not a show without you at all. So please add your input. If you have any questions you want to ask anyone, please throw them up. And let's get ready to roll in.
It's that time again. Yes, it's time for Aquavian to open the Night Brothers Bar and bring you a great menu of tasty libations and show topics. So go ahead, Aquavian Night, Mr. Bartender, Mr. Fast Master himself, and tell everyone what's on tap tonight.
Thank you, Miss Fast. And tonight, guys, we have a couple of tasty beverages for you to enjoy. And our first beverage on tap tonight, we're going to revisit something we talked about back in February, but we were unable to get our special guest to join us then, but he said he could do it tonight, and so we're going to revisit. We're going to take a closer look at the contrast between Martin and Malcolm with our special guest commentary. So this is going to be very interesting and something I'm really looking forward to, especially in terms of educational for all of us. Secondly, our second tasty beverage is the main feature. KBS feature segment tonight, interviews and insightful discussion with our guest. And this falls under the umbrella of Not Your Father's Politics, or Politics Not As Usual. And we're going to have a lively discussion with Melissa Clink and with Carl Snowden as we break down local, statewide, and national politics and where we are and where we're headed. Back to you, Lenny.
All right, Q. Orlando Mickles checking in. Just want to acknowledge your brother. Thank you for joining us tonight.
How you doing, my brother?
What's up, Lodi?
Yes, indeed. All right, so let's dive into Socially Speaking, folks. All right, y'all. Socially Speaking comes to you every Tuesday night. It's our section where we dive into social issues. Sometimes it's lighthearted, sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's informative. And tonight, it's going to be a little of all of those things. And we have a very, very good guest on here. He's a historian. He's been an activist, and he can really take you back to this era and give you a really unique perspective. We have no other than Carl Snowden as we revisit our look at Martin and Malcolm, the two different plans, the past and the ideologies that each one of these great leaders had during the 1960s. So look, we're going to let Carl give you a perspective of his mind. Like I said, local activists that, check this, he actually helped to shape the city of Annapolis during a response of their time. Now peek that. That's not something on everybody's resume. I know it's not on the restaurants on this show tonight. So we're gonna take a absolutely
Big ups.
So we're gonna take a look at this video. Take a look at the video, and then on the other side of that, we're gonna dive into the mind of Carl Snowden, who's gonna give you something to think about, folks. So let's check out the video. The contrasting styles between Martin and Malcolm. Check it out.
Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolence. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they have taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhounds for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as Uncle Tom, back during slavery, used to keep the Negroes from resisting the bloodhound or resisting the Ku Klux Klan by teaching them to love their enemy or pray for those who use them despitefully. Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom did on the plantation to keep those Negroes defenseless in the face of the attack of the Klan in that
Well,
day.
I don't think of
love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. I don't think of it as a weak force, but I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful direct action. Now, this is what I try to teach in the struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing. That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. Non-resistance leaves you in a state of stagnant passivity and deadening complacency, wherein non-violent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner.
The goal of Dr. Martin Luther King is to get Negroes to forgive the people who have brutalized them for 400 years by lulling them to sleep and making them forgetting what those whites have done to them. But the masses of black people in America today don't go for what Martin Luther King is putting down. As you said in one of your articles, it's psychologically insecure or something of that sort. I forget how you put it. But you didn't endorse what Martin Luther King was doing yourself.
I do not reject his goals of full integration and full equality rights for American citizens. Do you reject these goals?
If you don't think that he's walking on the right road, I'm quite sure you don't agree that he'll get to the right place.
I feel that killing is a very tragic way to deal with any social problem. There is no violent solution to the problem that the Negro confronts in this country, and this is why I have constantly said that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. After all, the Negro ends up on the losing end. We can't win a violent revolution. Most of the persons killed in riots are Negroes themselves. The persons who end up not being able to get milk for their children of Negroes because things where they have to live are destroyed. So there's no practical or moral answer in the realm of violence to the Negro's problem. But I do understand the sociological, the psychological, and the economic.
All right, we're going to take a look at that. And I'm so glad that we have Carl on this evening
Yes.
to really help us learn something. I mean, adjunct professor, historian, activist. Q, why don't you start off with the first question for Carl tonight?
Yes, Carl. Howard, first of all, once again, we really appreciate you being with us tonight, and we look forward to having a great discussion with you and learning from you. And Carl, the first thing we wanted to do, we wanted to examine these two different philosophies and help us understand the climate. I want you to really break down the climate of the nation at that time. How were African Americans feeling not only about themselves, but about this country as a whole, and about its leadership and the direction? So if you could just break that down as you break down the two different philosophies between the men.
Well, I think most people often contrast Malcolm and Martin, and I like to compare Malcolm and Martin to just the opposite. Both died at the age of 39. Both had Baptist fathers. Both of them, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, were victims of government surveillance. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, until the day they died, were under government supervision. In fact, most people know that the government, the FBI, the State Department, the CIA, all had powers on Malcolm X. But very few people know what to tell you that occurred here in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. There is a connection between Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X in Anne Arundel County. And here's what it is. In 1964, before Dr. King was going to get his Nobel Peace Prize, the FBI went to the National Security Agency, NSA, and asked him to do something that at that time was illegal. They actually do a psychological profile on both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.
Wow.
What they did was determine how they could get each of these men to commit suicide.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
And so with Martin Luther King Jr., what they discovered with Martin Luther King Jr., at the tender age of 8 years old, Martin Luther King Jr. Grandmother died, and he was so distraught over that, and he literally jumped out of a window in grief of his grandmother. And so the FBI felt that if you put enough pressure on Martin Luther King Jr., that he would commit suicide. So the NSA gave them the psychological profile on both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. And the way they tried to get Martin Luther King Jr. to commit suicide, the FBI had taped his room, found out that Martin Luther King Jr. was having an extramarital affair, and Martin Luther King Jr. was about to get the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. And so the FBI sent anonymously to Dr. King's wife a cassette that clearly showed that Dr. King was engaged in extramarital affair. And they had hoped that he would commit suicide. In fact, they sent him a letter anonymously saying, "We know who you are, we know what you do privately. We will reveal this to the nation, and you have 1 month, 30 days, to commit suicide." And they selected 30 days because it was that exact time he would have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize. And they were concerned because at that time in 1964, Dr. King was considered almost a saint. Nobody would have thought he would be engaged in any extramarital affair. The way he handled that shows the kind of man he was. He obviously did not commit suicide. With Malcolm X, they discovered with Malcolm X, mental illness ran in Malcolm's family. Malcolm's mother was put in an asylum when he was very young. Malcolm had a brother that had mental illness. And again, they thought that if they applied the right kind of pressure on Malcolm, that he too would commit suicide. Some argue that when Malcolm refused to allow bodyguards to search people coming into the mosque, it was an indication that he was suicidal. Neither of these things, I believe, are true with Martin and Malcolm. In both cases, in the case of Martin Luther King Jr., when he knew that the government was spying on him, if you listen to Dr. King starting in 1964 until he died, he was a far different man than he was in 63. Same thing with Malcolm X. The excerpts that you used when Malcolm was speaking, Malcolm was a member of the Nation of Islam at that time. But he had left the Nation of Islam. His views changed. In fact, it was Malcolm X who frankly said that he would team up with anybody, regardless of their race, their color, or their religion, because he understood that this issue was bigger than black and white. And Malcolm X, by the way, is a symbol around the world of resistance. This is Martin Luther King Jr. become a symbol of resistance. Both men were assassinated. Both men were victims of this government, and both men were feared. Ironically, believe it or not, Edgar Hoover thought that Martin Luther King Jr. posed a greater threat to the nation than Malcolm X. And the reason for that, the FBI thoroughly infiltrated the Nation of Islam. They knew everything the Nation of Islam was doing. And they felt they had the Nation of Islam in check. Martin Luther King Jr., on the other hand, was impacting on people beyond African Americans, mobilizing, energizing, and organizing people. And that toward the end of his life, he had become very, very radical. Most people who know Martin Luther King Jr. talk about the Martin Luther King Jr. of 1963. They don't talk about Martin Luther King of 1967, who wrote this incredible speech called "Why I Opposed the War in Vietnam," where he called America the most violent nation on the face of the earth. In many ways, Martin Luther King Jr., at the end of his life, had moved to Malcolm's position, and Malcolm, at the end of his life, was moving to Martin Luther King Jr.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
So Carl, you're saying they both kind of evolved over a period of time.
Yes.
All right, great.
Juanita Cage is confirming or at least agreeing with you in her statement and some of the things that she said, and I'll let the audience read it for themselves while we continue. discussion. But Arden, go ahead. What was your question for Carl?
No, I was going to ask, in light of that, how has your position changed? I mean, because realistically, my question you really went through just now, as far as you ran right through that answer. That's why I thought you pulled it off. So I definitely appreciate that. But like as you came up, as a young man, 15, 16, seeing what you saw in Annapolis and around the world and around the globe. And I know some stories, I know, Brother Amos Johnson, I came up under him. He speaks very highly of you, learned, a lot, sitting down talking to you, I learned a lot. But how did your mindset change as you become of age to now being the mentor?
Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X literally saved my life. That's not a joke. I was introduced to Malcolm X in the 10th grade, and literally he helped me to understand what was happening in the world. I was a typical 15-year-old. I hadn't even thought of the kind of questions that Malcolm X was able to get me to think about. Black people, our history. Where did black people come from? It was Malcolm X who helped me understand where white people came from. I never knew where white people. It never dawned on me where white people came from. And as a result of doing a lot of reading, a lot of research, I had a better understanding of how black people fit in America. Most people have very little understanding of the history of black people in this country. And it was Malcolm X that was able to encourage me to have a greater understanding of the institutions and the history we live in. And I'll just give one quick example. The vast majority of people who are listening to this program actually think, because they've been told this by the media, that the first time in American history that women lost the right to reproductive rights was last year when the Supreme Court handed out the famous decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. And it's not true. That is not the first time women lost the right to reproduction rights. It's the first time white women lost that. What occurred was Dred Scott's decision that was handed down by the Supreme Court said that black people had no rights that white people were bound to respect. And what that literally meant was that white men could rape, and they did, abuse, and they did, black women. There was no legal recourse. The Supreme Court said black people had no rights, and so there were women, black women in particular, who did not have control of their body. They could be raped, and they were. They were forced to do all kinds of things. And yet, that part of history is not acknowledged. Even today, people want to pretend that did not happen. And so much of the history that we think that we know, we really don't. If you ask the average person in Annapolis, Maryland, for example, why was there a riot in 1919 on June 27th in Annapolis? First they said, what riot? I never heard of there being a riot in Annapolis. But if you go ahead and Google it, you find that Annapolis had a riot in 1919. That was during the period what they call the Bloody Summer, where all these lynchings took place. So I think it's very, very important that we understand our history, keep the history in context. I shared with some folks today that if they were just to, right now, Google the city of Philadelphia apologizes to black people. And when you Google that, you're going to find the world that this happened. How come I never knew this? Right. And this is something they apologized not 20 years ago, but October of last year. And what did they apologize for? They were experimenting on black people in Philadelphia without their consent. And before people run up and say, well, that was Philadelphia, they did the exact same thing here in Anne Arundel County at a place called Crownsville State Hospital.
Yes, they did.
Experimented on black people. And if you go to Crownsville State Hospital today, you will discover unmarked graves, hundreds of them. And all they have on those graves are the numbers of those persons who died in Crownsville. Nobody talks about that history. Nobody wants to talk about that. So Malcolm and Martin helped me understand that we really need to understand the context in which we live and why certain things occur. Ask the average person in Annapolis, why is Annapolis called Annapolis? They have no idea. And when you tell them that Annapolis is named after a woman named Queen Anne, who was formerly Princess Anne, and that her father was the Duke of York, and that's who New York City is named after, the Duke of York. And what did the Duke of York do, along with his daughter, Princess Anne? They were engaged in human trafficking. They made their money by selling human beings, black people. And they named the city of Annapolis after this woman, Queen Anne. And black people who live in the city have no idea. They have no idea why Annapolis has the name it has, or why we call it Anne Arundel. And so the more we learn the history, the better it will be. And that's again one of the reasons why all over the country there's now an effort to ban what you can teach in schools.
That's right.
If they ever learn what they have, if they ever knew what their real history is, it's incredible. And again, I end on this note, and I want people to look it up. Because if you tell them, they can't believe it. Most people think that the current Vice President of the United States, Vice President Harris, who's married to a white man and had white stepchildren, that she's the first vice president to bring into the White House what's called a blended family. And it's just not true. That honor goes to a man named Vice President named Richard Mentor Johnson. He was a non-vice president of the United States. He served under a man named Martin Van Buren. There's a street named after Martin Van Buren here in Annapolis. Well, what did Vice President Johnson, what did he do? He married a black woman, Melissa. He had two black daughters.
Wow.
Martin Van Buren lost the election when he ran for re-election because he could not get his vice president to disown his black wife and black daughters. Wow. Now, when you Google this, and if they Google the name Julie Chin, Chinn, they'll discover that she was married to the non-vice president of the United States. Now, why can one matriculate to public schools here in Anne Arundel County throughout the nation, graduate from colleges and universities, and for many people who are listening tonight, this is the first time they even heard of Julie Chin, and that she was married to a vice president and had two black daughters. And I defy anybody who, once they do start this research, find out what happened to Julie Chin's two daughters, these two black women. They're lost.
I'm already taking a lot of notes. That was news to me. Thank you for sharing.
Me too. If that was news to you, put a 1 down in the chat. If you didn't know that, put a 1 down in the chat.
That was big, Carl. I grew up in Annapolis. Carl, and I've known you for a long time. When I say I've known you, I've known of the work you've done. And a lot of the things some of the things you said I knew about, but a lot of the things I had no idea in my city, the city that I grew up in. That being said, the deaths of both men, both Martin and Malcolm, were clouded in controversy until the little bone they threw out about Malcolm not too long ago, and they've never been clearly resolved. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's what's very important for everybody to understand. Who narrates the story, who tells the story, controls the narrative. Give an example of this. In Annapolis, I had the great honor in 1984 of meeting Rosa Parks. I'd never met Rosa Parks, I'd read about Rosa Parks. And so she appears at First Baptist Church. This is in 1984 for Black History program. The church is jam-packed with people. And Mrs. Parks,
I was there.
a very diminutive woman, speaking in a very calm voice, finished her speech, told her story, and a white reporter said to Mrs. Parks, "Mrs. Parks, why did you refuse to give up your seat to a white man in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955? And I will never forget the answer that Mrs. Parks gave. She responded to the white reporter by saying, "Sir, I did not refuse to give up my seat to a white man. I refused to give up my dignity."
Powerful, powerful. Well, Carl, Melissa has a question for you as well, because we're all learning tonight. But
Yes.
Well, you're about to say, finish up. I don't know if you finished this thought. Did you finish your thought on that note?
Now, I just wanted to make it clear that when you ask the question of like Martin and Malcolm and what happened in their assassination, there are people, it's not for many of us who understand this, there's no confusion. The government killed Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. There's no confusion. And if people understood this, listen, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed on April 4th, 1968. On June 30th, 1974, his mother was assassinated. You know how many people don't know that? That not only was Luther King Jr. assassinated, but his mother was assassinated. And if I want people to connect these dots, they're going to be stunned. Martin Luther King Jr. is stabbed in Harlem, New York in 1957 by a so-called demented black woman. Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother is murdered on June 30th, 1974 by a so-called demented black man. That's what killed Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother. And nobody asked the question.
Is there a dot between Malcolm and Martin's death? Is there some type of, because they were killed how far apart, Carl? Could you help us with that?
Well, just for people, so everybody understand, we're talking about the 60s. Here's what happened in the 60s, and people have forgotten this. In 1963, the first man that's assassinated is a man named Medgar Evers.
Medgar Evers.
Yes.
Right. That's in 1963. In November that same year, John Kennedy is assassinated in Texas. In 1965, Malcolm X is killed in New York City. In 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. is killed in April of that year. And that same year, in 1968, Robert Kennedy is killed. And then in 1969, Fred Hampton is murdered, while in his bed. All these assassinations took place during that period of time. Malcolm X once said, America's history is decided either by ballots or bullets. And he's absolutely right. The bullets have often decided the future of this country, and it's not been good. And I'm afraid that if we don't pay attention to what's going on, bullets will once again decide the fate of the country.
Wow.
All right, thank you so much. So in your opinion, how has history shaped the legacy of these great leaders from that era into the present day?
Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. are one of these very unique people. They come along once in 100 years. The kind of leadership they brought, it's unbelievable. And once you understand what Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. contributed to this nation, it's incredible. There's so many black men and women and others around the world who, I'm not joking with you when I said that Malcolm X literally saved my life, because I understood after learning what his struggles was about. He helped me see the world as it really is. And I've had the great pleasure of meeting all kinds of people. I thank God that I met Dick Gregory, who knew both Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Dick Gregory told me something about both of these men that were just unbelievable. Dick Gregory, who met both of them, said that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, they did an autopsy on his body. He was 39 years old, but he had a heart of a man who was 60 years old. The stress that was placed on Martin Luther King Jr. is just unbelievable. Malcolm X, many people forgot, Malcolm X was assassinated in front of his children and his wife.
Wife and children, pregnant wife.
And he was shot with a shotgun. They shot him with a shotgun and his bullets. And today, the three men that was accused of killing Malcolm X were exonerated, and New York State and New York City just awarded them millions of dollars.
Exactly.
Who were turning around saying, I'm just learning this. Well, many of us knew that these men did not kill Malcolm X. We knew it. We knew who were involved.
It's a fascinating statement that Juanita Cage Lewis put on the same day Martin Luther King was assassinated. Many don't know the owner of the motel where he was shot and died of a massive heart attack. What happened at that hotel?
Actually, that woman she's referring to, if you go to Memphis, Tennessee, Martin Luther King Jr. was at the Lorraine Motel. The Lorraine Motel was named after the woman who owned that particular facility. And in 1968, the way it worked was you had a switchboard. And so when Martin Luther King Jr. was shot, this lady, Miss Lorraine, tried to call the authorities, get an ambulance, get help, and she couldn't get through to the lines. And she actually had a massive heart attack, as one needless to say, and she died. And her husband not only lost Martin Luther King that day, he lost his own wife.
Wow.
Wow. And just to take us back, excuse me, Q. There was colored only hotels and white hotels. So obviously you're speaking of an African American couple who were the hotel owners. Just to bring point to that story.
And so people understand this. Martin Luther King Jr. was staying at a Holiday Inn in Memphis, Tennessee. The FBI planted a story that all the local newspapers in that day ran. And the story was Martin Luther King Jr. talking black, but staying in a white hotel. Dr. King reacted to that criticism by moving from the Holiday Inn to the Lorraine Motel. And they wanted him to go to the Lorraine Motel because it was less security. And it was easier to kill him. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Well, look, audience, we're going to segue to the next segment. But before we do that, I want everybody, because Carl, I learned about 5 things in this segment just now.
Yes, sir.
I learned at least 5 things I learned in this segment from you. Thank you for imparting your wisdom and knowledge. And audience, if you learned something as well, won't you just drop a 1 in the chat group or just simply say thank you, Carl, for just giving us these nuggets of information that we should take and pass on to our children as well.
And that Lorraine Hotel is actually still open today for you to view. It's actually been turned into a museum. And his room is still set up exactly how it was when it happened. It's really interesting if you ever get an opportunity to go down there and check that out.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So look, we're going to segue to the next segment because we want to learn a lot more about what Carl has done in and around the Annapolis and Anne Arundel County areas. Well, as we told you, we want to talk about not your daddy's politics, not politics as usual. So we want to dive into a little in-depth discussion in more of the political aspect, drink number 2, as Equavian said earlier. And we're going to take a look at a video. We're going to talk about it on the other side. But I'll be remiss if I didn't get a couple comments up here because everybody's saying thank you. I don't want, Darlene says thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Of course, Margaret Nick.
Yes, indeed.
And oh, look who's out there. The beautiful one. D. Goodwin. All right. D. Goodwin, you're going to be really interested in this next segment because we're going to segue into some great things that Carl is doing locally as well as talk about some of the wonderful things that Melissa Clink is doing down in Forsyth County in Georgia. But we wanted to get the thank yous on the screen before we did that. So I think we're good to go, Q. So let's take a look at this video and then let's talk about it on the other side. Okay?
Leaders of Anne Arundel County emerged out of a pursuit to inspire and support the community and a desire for actions to speak louder than words. Established in 2011, we're an organization driven by progressive ideas, bold actions, and a strong foundation of community support. The purpose of the Caucus of African American Leaders of Anne Arundel County, also known as CAAL, is to fight for the human rights of African Americans and to create a just society. The CAAL believes in the principle that the rights of women, labor, LGBTQ, environmentalist, and all marginalized groups must be both respected and protected. The CAAL believes in the beloved community that Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. gave his life for, and at the same time we believe in Malcolm X's assertion. We must demand our right on this earth to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, on this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary. The vision behind CAAL is driven by a single goal, to do our part in making the world a better place for all. Our decision-making process is informed by comprehensive empirical studies and high-quality data evaluation. We strive to build productive relationships and make a positive impact with all of our pursuits. Carl Snowden, who is the convener of the caucus, embodies the statement which reads, "Dealing with the challenges of today requires problem solvers who bring different perspectives and are willing to take risks." Snowden has been vocal in taking risk and being an activist as early as the 1960s. His commitment to the city of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County has spanned decades, and he is still a force within the state and an instrumental member of the caucus. Along with other members of the Annapolis community such as Delorma Goodwin, Claudia DeGreat, Bishop Antonio Palmer, Charles James, Angela Brown, Judge Vicki Gibson, Tiana Parker, and others, the organization has been able to perform great works in bringing social justice and honor many.
All right. And the thank yous keep coming. But Carl, we want to segue and talk about a couple other issues tonight. So what we want to do right now, we want to dive into Anne Arundel County and statewide, the political scene from the perspective of the caucus of African American leaders. From that perspective, and then we're gonna open up with my brother E. Quavian. Asking you a question.
Hi, Carl. First of all, once again, thank you. And I've had the opportunity to attend a few of the latest caucus of African American leaders meetings in Anne Arundel County. And I want you to, if you could just take the time, and we want to give them some time. We want to break down who are the members, how did it originate, and what are some of the objectives of the caucus of African American.
I guess the best way in the brief way is this. There are two kinds of insects that many are aware of. One is a bumblebee and the other is a hornet. With bumblebees, you can literally kill 1,000 bumblebees and all the bumblebees who are standing around will do nothing. But if you put your hand on a hornet, every hornet in the nest will attack you. We try to get out the hornets to get them to understand when you put your hands on one of us, you have all of us to deal with. So when the caucus was developed, the whole concept behind the caucus is that we're more effective when we work together. One thing won't kill you, but 1,000 things can and will. And so we just want to get our people to understand that we need to be hornets and not bumblebees. We were able to kill Malcolm and Martin because we did not maintain the unity that we needed to make, to maintain. And so the caucus has been in existence almost a decade now. And every Monday morning we meet at 9 a.m. with people from around the state of Maryland, talking about issues that impact on Black people. And this coming, a week from tomorrow, we're going to have the Michelle Obama Awards that's played at the Whitewater Park, where we honor women who have made huge contributions to Anne Arundel County. And we honor all kinds of women who've done all kinds of things. And we think it's important that we preserve our history by making sure we celebrate women who tell our story.
Amen. Thank you for just a breakdown. And I know you guys do so much more, but we're gonna keep it moving because we're trying to get so much covered.
Absolutely. But listen, does Forsyth County have a grassroots organization similar to what Cal does in Maryland? And if so, tell us about it.
To unmute.
Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Melissa.
Sorry. So I'll try that again. So in Forsyth County, we have two different groups. One is called Connect the Dots, and they started after they met at a women's march and realized they lived in Forsyth County, and they decided to organize a mixer. That's how it kind of started. And the idea was that they were blue dots in a red sea, and they were trying to connect those dots to each other. So they are now 800 people strong, and they've been really, really effective and influential in all of the things that are happening in Forsyth County. And some of their founding members are now board members of the Forsyth County Democratic Committee. And then we also have something called They See Blue. They See Blue is a progressive organization that is for South Asians. So it is also influential, and it has been influential with winning for Biden, for Georgia, and our first, the first South Asian Democratic Party chair is my successor, and in Georgia and Forsyth County. So they definitely contribute to what's happening on the ground.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Great, Melissa. I mean, and my wife put thank you, ladies, for service to the community, especially during Women's Month. And you doing it down there, Melissa. We're so proud of what you're doing. You know, just
Thank you,
continue to be that beacon of hope and shining that light. Hey, we're gonna jump over to the next segment for time's sake, but because we got a lot that we want to cover with Carl.
Yeah.
So. Look, Carl and Melissa, we want this segment to segue a little bit more from local politics and to slowly kind of phase into national politics. So who's starting off the first question? Q, I think it's coming your way, brother.
Yes, sir. Listen, Carl, you know, we want to say that Caucus of African American Leaders has been instrumental in getting people out to vote, and things of that nature. And part of that impact has been that for the first time ever, Everett Seskin, an African American, was voted as sheriff of Anne Arundel County, and that Erica Griswold, for the first time ever, an African American in the position of Register of Wills. Could you talk about the impact that, first of all, that the Caucus of African American Leaders had with getting that to happen, and to talk about them as a whole, those two leaders?
We endorse those candidates. Ran a remarkable campaign. You're right, most people don't realize we've never elected a black sheriff or black register of wills until this past election, 2022. And part of the reason why, I just want to make sure people understand how we got there. Too many people think whether it's Westmore or whether it's Sheriff Susker or even our register of wills, that they did it on their own. No, they stand on the shoulders of people who came before them, who laid the foundation. I just want to thank the Knight brothers, because y'all may not realize this. Your mother, Miss Bessie, was at the 1963 March on Washington, D.C. Think for a second. She was one of those tens of thousands of people that was there as part of this effort. And at that time, in 1963, there were very few blacks that were elected in Anne Arundel County. And the only blacks that were elected was in the city of Annapolis. But at the county level, there had not a single black person.
Wow.
In the county level.
Wow.
And then following the 1963 March on Washington, some 11 years later, the first black woman got elected in Anne Arundel County Council. Her name is Sarah Carter. She got elected. The first black woman didn't get elected in the city of Annapolis until 1997. Her name is Cynthia Carter. So this progress that we've made didn't come overnight. A lot of people made a lot of sacrifices. One of the things I loved about the local politics, it's changed everything. Judge Vicki Gibson is the second black woman to ever serve on the Orphans Court. And thanks to Governor Westmore, she's going to be the county chief judge. That's his story. And it happened because men and women got involved and made a huge difference in this particular county.
I appreciate that, Carl. Definitely. Have you had the opportunity to discuss with the newly elected Maryland Governor Westmore? You know, his no one left behind platform, and based on that, what do you think about the agenda and the possibilities of implementing something and such?
Governor Westmore is only the third African American in the nation's history to get elected governor. We've already in the discussions with him. One of the things we want to do here in Annapolis at the State House is want to build a memorial to Kern Mitchell. I'll say it again. Kern Mitchell was the first African American to be elected to the Congress. These are the men and women who came before Westmore. We want our young people to remember who they were.
Yes.
Yeah. Made a huge contribution. And you will not believe this, but this is year 2023. On the current State House grounds, not to be confused with the Lawyers' Ball with Thurgood Marketers, but in Annapolis on the State House grounds, there's not a single memorial or statue to any African American at all. Wow. We pick up 30% of the state's population. Wow. And we're going to advocate with this government that we have an African American, Kern Mitchell, hopefully, on that particular State House ground, so that our children will understand what's happening.
Angela Dwyer say Perrin Mitchell was a Morgan State alumni, huh?
He was.
Didn't know that either.
Go Morgan.
He also,
learned so much tonight.
he also sued successfully the University of Maryland. Black people couldn't go to the University of Maryland. They were doing segregation. Black people couldn't go. It was Perrin Mitchell who sued the University of Maryland.
Wow.
That made it possible for black people.
Open those doors. Okay.
Wow. Another fun fact for you. Thanks, Cole. Appreciate you.
Melissa,
Yes, sir.
as we celebrate Women's Month and your close ties with Senator Warner, explain how pivotal women were in the last senatorial runoff election in Georgia. That was big.
Yeah, it was really big. We actually had to go right into high gear, and it was shortened because of SB202. So the amount of time we were able to reach out to our voters was really diminished. So I can say without a doubt, especially in the 6th congressional district for that race, we would not have had the direct voter contact that we had if it wasn't for myself and another woman named Anna, who were making sure to load all of the stuff for what we were giving to volunteers. So we were preparing all of the things. Now, men definitely helped carry that out. But if it wasn't for myself and Anna, like there would have been no direct contact for the 6th congressional district. We were able to really to spread out what the work that we had and, engage other people in it. But absolutely, women were pivotal. I remember reading Angela Davis's autobiography, and one part really stood out to me. She talked about how sometimes the men would get angry that she would take lead or the other women would take lead. And she would say, well, all of these things need to be done. And no one else has taken, control of it. They haven't signed up for it. So we did. So it wasn't that it was on purpose. It's just how it worked out. So I thought that was really interesting that not a lot has changed in organizing at that level since then. It's very the same. So I thought that was very intriguing.
Awesome. Good job. Great
Thank
job.
you. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
We're going to segue, folks. We want to talk a little bit about, like I said, national politics and the future of America, Carl, and explore some of these new black voices that we talked about, like, who, what, when, and what roles will they play. And some of this is, we're thinking out loud as we discuss, what could be the new black voices coming up through America to kind of help the movement and continue the legacy that Martin and Malcolm created. So who's up to bat first? I think it's you, Q. You're at the top there.
Well, Carl, in today's politics, man, there's so much vitriol and so much rhetoric and so much hate. And we seem to be moving toward a zero-sum game. And the division between the parties is larger than it's ever been. And just, the TV2 news networks and things of that nature are all having this part of our nation that's just been driven apart. What I would like to know is bipartisanship a thing of the past? Remember when Tip O'Neill and others would come together? Will we ever get back to that point? Or what will it take to get back to that point where politics, where we can stop the division between us? The parties.
Well, there's always been division in the country. You cannot look at the period of American history where there's not been division. Whenever someone says, let's make America great again, the question must be asked, when was it great? What period where we had all Americans benefiting from the fact, one of the things that this is Women's History Month, and normally history is divided by BC and AD, but in history, if you really understand American history, it's really divided by men and women. And women didn't get the right to vote until 1920. Women didn't get that right to vote. All women didn't get the right to vote until 1920. And here's something that most people, again, don't know, but Anne Arundel County and the state of Maryland. In 1909, the Maryland Democratic Party that was in charge passed what was called a grandfather clause in 1909. And the grandfather clause simply said, if your grandfather couldn't vote, you can't vote.
Wow.
And it disenfranchised thousands of black people.
Wow.
Here in the city of Annapolis, black people have always been on the city council from 1873 to the present with that unacceptable 1909 to 1915, blacks lost the right to vote. That was done by the Maryland General Assembly. In politics, if we understand it in this term, we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests.
Permanent interest. Yep.
We need to look at the interests, and I'll end with this, and I hope people appreciate this. During the most darkest time, one of the most darkest time in American history, was the Dred Scott decision. It said black people had no rights that white people were bound to respect. Right. At that, one of the great leaders of that day was a man named Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass was an incredible orator, but he himself couldn't find the words to deal with the fact that the Supreme Court had said black people had no rights. At that same meeting, a black woman, her name was Sojourner Truth, who was illiterate, couldn't read or write. She walked into that building. They were meeting to talk about what was going to be done, and she saw all these people who were gloomy and distraught. And she said, "What's wrong, Frederick?" And Frederick Douglass went on to explain to her how had handed down this decision, and it meant that black people had no rights that white people were bound to respect. And when he finished, she said, "Is that all?" And Frederick Douglass looked at this woman. Did you not just understand what I just said? The Supreme Court had said black people has no rights that white people were bound to respect. And Sojourner Truth looked at him and said, "I didn't know that you believed in the Supreme Court. I thought you believed in the Supreme Being. Our God, we have our faith in our God. We will survive. We will prevail." It's that kind of belief in black people and the fact that we can and have survived some difficult times. I've seen Republicans, I've seen Democrats, I've seen liberals, and I've seen conservatives. And I think of my mother, 104 years old. She never wanted people to ever say nothing's changed in America. Her life is a living testament to how much. And so I'm very optimistic. And to the question of who the future leaders are, nobody could predict that Martin Luther King Jr. He came out of nowhere.
Yes.
Nobody knew that Barack Obama was president of the United States. He came out of nowhere. Shirley Chisholm in 1972. I think our best days are ahead of us, not behind us. I think we're going to see changes that this world has never seen before. And I'm just very, very optimistic. And I wanted to share, if I can, before we end, several books I would recommend people to read. Please. One of them is called The Three Mothers. It's a book called The Three Mothers, and it's about Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother, Malcolm X's mother, and James Baldwin's mother. And all I'm going to tell you is, anybody who's ever had a mother, and I was very fortunate to have a very supportive mother, when you read what these women did to create these men, you won't be optimistic at all. James Baldwin's father was a preacher, but it's what James Baldwin's mother told him that changed his course of history. The next one is a book that if you happen to live in Annapolis, Maryland, it's going to be relevant to you. It's a book called Smile for Me. Smile for Me. It's written by a young black man who came out of the Robin Hood community, and he's doing life in prison as we speak. He's been there for 21 years. Smile for Me. I strongly encourage people to take that. And then the last one, if you really want to get into some history, this book is called Wake, W-A-K-E. And it's written by a woman named Rebecca Hall. And here's what I want everybody to understand, because this woman.
Can you hold that up a little closer? Yeah, there you go. There you go.
We think of Harriet Tubman as an aberration, because it seemed like Harriet Tubman did something that nobody else did with this Underground Railroad. Folks, it's not true. This book is about black women who led successful slave revolts. Black women who were able to do what Nat Turner did not do. It's an incredible history of black women who struggled and fought. You know, I am one who must tell you, someone mentioned Angela Davis. Angela Davis was 26 years old when they were going to put her in the gas chamber. It was in 1972. They were going to put her in the gas chamber. She was only 26 years old. And it was James Baldwin who wrote an open letter to Angela Davis, but he was really talking to all of us. And in his letter, he said, if they come for you tonight and we do nothing to stop them, they'll come for us in the morning. We do not allow you to die. And she's almost 80 years old, and it was Black people and people of goodwill all over this nation and the world that prevented Angela Davis from going to the gas chamber. I know what we do as a people when we organize, mobilize, and energize our community. I've seen it many, many times. So I'm very, very optimistic that we will be coming with some new leaders, with a new vision, and we've got a lot of potential here in the state of Maryland with Wes Moore. First Black governor, Wes Moore. First Attorney General, Anthony Brown. First Speaker of the House, Black, Adrian Jones. First Black president. And there's 64 members of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. When the caucus was founded in 1971, there was a total of 12 members, and I know all 12 of them. So that's how small it was.
Wow. Carl, we had a question from the audience. Linda Tong wanted to know, could you hold up and give us the name of that first book that you
First
showed?
book you showed, yeah.
Oh, The Three Mothers?
Yes.
The Three Mothers, and it's written by Annapolis. And what you'll love about The Three Mothers, it talks about how Malcolm's mother influenced them, Martin King's mother, how she influenced him, and James Baldwin. For those who are James Baldwin readers, it's an incredible what his mother did to him. Absolutely. Wow.
And Lenny, if we could go back a little bit, I just want to, because I want to touch on this. I don't want to lose sight of this as we talked about future leadership. And Carl, you just mentioned that Wes Moore as a future leader, but I also want to talk about, Melissa, if you could talk about Raphael Warnock and his role of leadership going forward. If you could just touch on that as well.
Well, I know it took several years for us to kind of beg and convince him to run for Senate, right? And he was a social justice warrior in his own right long before that. I think that he would have national appeal. I'm not certain that he's interested in the position. And that is just because I think that him being a politician has everything to do with a moral imperative to be there and do the right thing for as many people as he can. And not so much of an ambitious kind of thing. So I'm not certain that, had things not worked out the way that they had, and so many activists and organizations and the Democratic Party and things like that really encouraging run, I don't think we would have seen that side of him, but he's an excellent orator as well. I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to hear him speak. If you do have an opportunity to get to hear him speak, definitely go to that, because he's just very riveting. Knows exactly how to speak to your heart. And I've never really heard a whole lot of ministers who are able to speak to women's choice and why it's their choice and to support that, especially coming from the African American church. That's really powerful. And I think what he has to say about choice is really powerful. But as far as his aspirations for president, I'm just not certain that that's something that he's looking to do. But I do know this show is ready to vote for that. So I get that. Definitely.
Carl, I want to segue what Melissa just was talking about, because the pastor as a politician, because, Malcolm and Martin, both, like you said, they came from the church. People, especially when Malcolm failed to realize that, especially when Malcolm made his pilgrimage and he came back, a new changed man, and he acknowledged white brothers and things of that nature. But the pastor as a politician with Senator Warnock, could you talk about that aspect, both of y'all, a little bit, and Carl, starting with you, and how that dynamic, because it once wasn't there in America, but now it's necessary. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, again, for those who know history, all of the major leaders, most people don't know Nat Turner was a pastor, by the way. But he was God inspired. Senator Walnut, by the way, is the pastor of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. That's where Martin Luther King Jr. preached from.
Yes.
One of the greatest politicians we ever had in this nation was happened to have been a pastor. His name was Adam Clayton Powell Jr.
Yep.
It wasn't Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who was a minister. It was Adam Clayton Powell Jr. that was able to get a man named Wesley Brown into the United States Naval Academy. Because at the time, the only way you could get in the academy, you had to be appointed by a sitting member of the Congress. And it was Adam Clayton Powell Jr. who did this. And he came out of Harlem, New York.
Yes, he did.
I loved about Adam Clayton Powell. 5 congressmen, black, when he first went into the Congress. And they had segregation in Washington, D.C. It was segregated. And there was supposed to be a rule that black people, black Congress people, should be able to go to the white barber shops on Capitol Hill like anybody else. The 4 people who were there before Adam Clayton Powell, they respected what they called custom. They would not go there. When Adam Clayton Powell found out that he could get his hair cut, he went there, and they got national publicity because he was the first black man to get his hair cut. And what did Adam Clayton Powell do? He found out that as a congressman, he had the privilege of having anybody he wanted to come get a haircut. So he found 5 of the blackest in complexion men who were black and brought them into that whitest. So pastors have been incredible. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, Jesse Run.
Yes.
I mean, black people and pastors, spiritual people have always been involved in our movement, and there is a connection between the church and politics. It always has been.
Amen. Hey, well, look, we're gonna go to our close. I mean, just another absolutely fantastic night with two great guests. We couldn't be more appreciative of your time. Both of you have very esteemed positions within your respective states and communities. And we know for you to take of your time tonight to spend some with the Knight brothers, we're just trying to do our part in the community as well. But go ahead, Ari.
I just wanted to ask you, Carl, if you could share your information just in case somebody wanted to reach out to your organization. I know you represent and deal with a number of them. Just in case somebody's out there that may need your assistance in moving something forward, how would they get in touch with you to get some consultation or move forward in that aspect?
Thank you very much for that question. The Caucus of African American Leaders has a website. Please go to the website. But also, if you, I'll give you my cell phone number, which is 443-871-5656. 443-871-5656. When you contact the Caucus of African American Leaders, it's like calling the fire department. Our job is to put out fires. And if you don't want us to put out the fire, you should be calling. But if you're interested in really having social change, this is the organization to be involved in. We really, really believe that people can and have made a huge difference in our nation.
Thank you, Carl. I mean, because I'm a firm believer is that the bottom line is together we can all achieve more. The whole finger to the fist syndrome, the whole situation that, it takes a village to move things forward. And that village can look a lot of different ways, but the thing is you have a common purpose, and a common cause. So I just appreciate your effort, in your life and how you help my life and many people that I know. So salute you. Definitely appreciate you from day one, and it's an honor to have you on once again. Always.
Thank you,
I love that you said don't call us unless you want us to put out fires, because
I love that.
Organizer. Don't call me if you don't want me to do nothing about the problem. Yeah,
Carl, some people complaining and don't want to do nothing. Let's be real.
Yeah, why'd you call me then? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right.
One of the things I'd like to just say real quickly before we go off there, and I want people to understand this, we really are blessed in many ways. And sometimes people don't see the blessing. And often there's a story of purpose told about a man going to Jesus. And the man said to Jesus, everybody in this village is wearing sandals and shoes. Where's my blessing, Jesus, he asked. And Jesus, without saying a word, took the barefoot man and introduced him to the man with no feet and said, sometimes your blessing's at your feet, you just don't feel it. We better appreciate the blessings that we have, and we are blessed. We still have a democracy. We can still have ways of making a huge difference. And we need to just pause and thank those who came before us. Yes. Nobody, and I do mean nobody, who've been successful in this country was successful without those who came before them paving the ways. We'll never know how many black people were lynched and murdered in this nation. But yes, we also will never know the number of black people whose grandmothers and grandfathers prayed for this day, that one day in this country we call America, that we would have opportunities that they would never have dreamt of. Now we have the opportunities, and we have the responsibility to make the world better, not only for ourselves, but for future generations yet unborn.
Wow.
Amen.
Better way to close that out.
Kenny, we're gonna let you have the last comments and or question toward Melissa and Carl, and then we're gonna close the thing out.
I don't have any comments or questions. I just want to first of all thank both of you for your time. Both of you are so politically versed. I've learned so much tonight about the city I grew up in, even though I've been gone 20 some odd years. I've been in and out. I've learned so much from you, Carl. Man, thank you so much. Clink, you know, we go way back like Apple Jacks. It was such a pleasure to have both of you and to see both sides and both your ways of thinking. It was a pleasure to have y'all, and thank y'all once again.
I was like, hey, we're on the same side.
That's right.
Exactly.
I was wondering about that side.
We're on the same side.
Yeah.
Our audience, there's only one way to get Carl and Melissa back. And if you just throw a 1 in the chat group, I'm sure we can persuade them to come back in the future. And just to show your appreciation to them, just drop a 1 in the chat group real fast. And while we close this thing out tonight.
And remember, the Caucus of African American Leaders meets once a month on Tuesday nights. This is the second Tuesday of the month, Carl. Is that correct?
And Carl, quickly tell us about the next event too, is real fast. And then we'll wrap up, Carl.
Michelle Obama is we're going to do the Michelle Obama Awards. It's going to be at Quiet Waters Park on Wednesday, March 29th. It's absolutely free. It's going to be a community event. We're going to be honoring women who've made a difference. And we're going to remember what Michelle Obama said. When they go low, we go high.
We go high, yes.
And so how are you honoring a certain number of women? And could you just give us a quick?
Yeah, there are 14 women that are being honored. Some of them include the first president, female president of St. John's College. That college has been in existence since 1619. For the first time in Annapolis, they have a woman president. We have Emma Buckman that's being honored, a woman named Pat Montague, who, by the way, organized the first Martin Luther King Jr. parade in Annapolis that's going to take place on April 1st this year. So there's a total of 14 women that's being honored. All of them are deserving of our praise. They've done some remarkable things. And Juanita Cage Lewis, of course, will be portraying Coretta Scott King during the April 1st Martin Luther King Jr. March. So again,
all right.
One point out.
Well, all right. Well, look, folks, we wish we could go on all night, but we can't, and we don't indulge on these folks' time. We thank Carl Snowden and thank Melissa Clink for joining us tonight. By the acknowledgement of your ones in the chat group. They have nodded and said yes, they'll be back in a future date. We'll let you know that in the near future, and be sure to support all the programs that the Caucus of African American Leaders are doing throughout Anne Arundel County, and show your support for Melissa Clink as she does great things down in Georgia, because it takes a village, and the village is is far and vast throughout these places we call the United States. So all of us have a role. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Both of y'all keep doing what y'all
Stay
do.
active.
Everybody hold on for it. Don't go anywhere, guests. Just hold on for it.
Yes.
Stay active and activate in your community.
Good night.
Definitely need you out there vote.
Good night, folks.
Good night, y'all. Love y'all.